Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Last day of the conference. Great way to kick off the day, I guess, with this panel. Thank you to my brilliant entrepreneur panelists here. They will speak about their solutions in a moment. But before I start asking them questions, so my name is Isabelle. I have been an impact investor in philanthropies for many years. And a big focus of mine has been early childhood education. So it's not only a passion of mine, it has also been an area of investments for many years. I wanted to start with a story. And this is now several years ago. I was visiting a family childcare center in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And just to frame the context, this was in a very low-income neighborhood in Bridgeport. And I spent some time with a wonderful woman who was leading the childcare center. And then I was about to leave her childcare center, and then I see that she had an Alexa in her home. And I start asking questions about how she was using the Alexa tool. And then she goes on and tells me all these very joyful stories about how she was connecting with a device to play music for the kids, and a number of other stories. And that has stayed with me, because it's again like at the early phase of adoption of Alexa in a home environment. And there's this childcare provider in a very low-income setting was already adopting this type of technology. So this is just one little story about how voice can be used and how actually childcare providers are starting to really embrace this new technology. And with me here, we have 5 amazing entrepreneurs working on very different solutions to use voice and audio to improve learning outcomes for children. And that leads me to my first question for each one of them, which is, where do they see the greatest benefits of audio and voice recognition in improving learning outcomes for our little ones? And I will start with you, Martyn.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Congratulations for making it this far on the conference. My name is Martyn Farrows. I am the CEO of SoapBox Labs. We've spent the last 8 years building the world's most accurate speech recognition platform exclusively for children and with children's needs in mind. So from the ground up. So not taking an existing speech recognition technology, but building a proprietary system from the ground up. And to answer the question, I think for me, the most exciting thing or the most relevant application or benefit of the technology with children is really the potential for inclusion. Voice technology can be an incredibly inclusive technology for children if it's done in the right way. And when I say if it's done in the right way, I mean by addressing issues such as bias, by making sure that the technology is able to support different demographics, that it's able to support children at different age levels. And in order to do that, you have to really focus on children's very specific needs. So that would be my kind of opening gambit, which is, let's talk about inclusion and let's talk about the proliferation of use cases that can be supported with voice that can support that agenda of inclusion.
Yeah. Can you expand a little bit more on how you're using it in your solution?
Sure. So we are a platform, right? So we are a B2B operation. So we help people to build magical experiences for kids using voice. But we don't build the end user experience ourselves. We rely on the expertise that's out there, and there's so many people out there who are already experts in early childhood education or play-based experiences, and we help them to use voice and enable those experiences.
Thank you. Daniel?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Daniel. I'm a German founder of Storypod. We are a stage-based storyteller. I have to admit, I rather stumbled into audio as a solution, as a potential solution for young children. I became a father a couple of years ago. And I was reminded of my own childhood. In Germany, it's a very, very strong audio market. We grow up with characters that are basically known from audio storytelling, not like Mickey Mouse, maybe from the screen, but other characters. And I noticed, I've been in technology now for 15, 16 years, built games, very addictive games, all screen-centered, and I noticed that somehow this audio experience of my childhood was fading. Or it's on some streaming service, maybe through a phone. And becoming a father, becoming a parent, and being concerned with the development of my own children made me look more into potential benefits of auditory exposure. You know, one of the first things I found, one quote from Einstein, if you want intelligent children, read them fairy tales. If you want them to be more intelligent, read them more fairy tales. And I was reminded how my father told me fairy tales that I couldn't even retell. So I got deeper and deeper into storytelling and looked at market solutions. And another thing I found in the first 5 years of early childhood brain development, that's where you put the basis for what comes later, the interest in learning. And so I looked at different solutions and figured I should build something, and I built a Storypod, this little speaker. We don't have AI, we don't have voice recognition. We start at age 6 months. We combine tactile experience with physical objects and storytelling, music for different stages of a kid's development. And we're really trying to figure out how this really helps them learn more words, be hopefully bright young minds in the future, and be open and ignited for the love of learning.
Okay, Daniel, you have to show it to us in a better way.
Okay, so give me a second to turn it on. Patience. So in a nutshell, that's why it's so simple. Even a 1-year-old, these are certified for ages 6 months, can just put a figurine on top. And it's very low volume because kids' ears are sensitive, so we have to adhere to certain certification requirements. But in a nutshell, now they listen to stories. And even my 1-year-old is just able to use it and this is for 5-year-olds in this case, but we have different content for different ages. And because we believe it's not just little figurines and things, we want interactivity, so we created trivia cards that once you scan them, start sessions that are curriculum-based, kindergarten, syllables, rhyming, recognizing patterns. So right now I'm in a trivia session. I didn't hear the question, unfortunately. I was right, that was luck. We are trying to obviously learn how kids interact with this device. We just launched it a year ago. Sorry, it never stops talking. And one last component, we incorporated books because we believe bookworms, it can never be wrong to read more books and be interested at an early age. And well, even my 2-year-old that can't read is excited to rip it apart, or just follow along while we guide her through a book and we guide her when to turn a page. And our whole purpose is to igniting this kind of interest.
Thank you. I was going to ask Tom. So Tom, you're working on a very, very different solution, very exciting, very early stage.
Very early
but
stage.
Tell us more about it. Yeah.
We've been live for 2 months now. So Ello is an AI reading coach that works with real books. A child picks up a real physical book, reads from it, and then Ello sits next to them on a tablet and theoretically does what a person would do. Engages them in the story, motivates them, coaches them when they get stuck. And for us, the thing that gets us excited, the reason why we've built this on the back of voice technology, is that learning is a deeply social process. And so if you think about that, the learning environment in which children ideally would learn and naturally learn, it's with a caring, informed adult who is engaging them and scaffolding them. And the way that happens is through voice. Like all children naturally, or nearly all children naturally learn to speak and to learn and to engage through voice, not through clicking on keyboards and stuff like that. And so we're really trying to replicate that experience of having that supportive, caring adult with the child as they read out loud. And voice is the first part of that, but there's obviously so much, as I'm sure Delonn's going to go into, so much more that goes into that than just voice. But voice is the thing that opens up the ability to do those interactions.
Thank you. Mark, you come at this from a deep scientific background, so and really more from an AI perspective.
Yeah, for us, voice is part of a complex that is really about delivering intelligent instruction. So Amira is a science of reading assistant that helps teachers to accelerate kids' reading mastery. The software basically listens to students as they read out loud, uses the speech stream to assess and understand their mastery and to identify issues like dyslexia and other kinds of reading and language disorders. And then Amira provides coaching coming from the place of employing the research and the proven interventions that drive mastery. Today's Amira is working with almost 1 million kids, and I will tell you that the core benefit of voice is that it's really enabling us to solve the early literacy problem, and for the first time to get more kids through the 3rd grade reading gate. Some of the research that's been done by the Columbia Teachers College over the COVID timeframe showed that working with the Amira software about 30 times produced the same acceleration in reading mastery as a human tutoring cycle. So.
Thank you. Delonn?
Hi, everyone. I'm Delonn Crosby, founder, CEO of SayKid. We combine voice technology with tangible play to help kids learn in a more actively engaging way without screens. And just real quick before I get into benefits, how I got into this was also by accident. A few years ago, my son was actually kicked out of preschool. He had this great teacher, loved his teacher, named his fish after this teacher, and ultimately that great teacher left, like half of early educators do. And unfortunately, the teacher that replaced this teacher just didn't have the same tools or training to relate to my son, which led to, happygrams and nastygrams that ultimately led him to being expelled. And at that point, obviously, it's really difficult to find early education in the U.S., and so I wanted to try to find a way, and I went really deep in terms of what are the root issues in education, and so this gets to the benefits, and I think there's 3. The first one's pretty obvious. The second and third are less obvious. So a lot of kids don't have access to early education, and I think if we're being honest, there's really no practical way to reach kids where they're at, which is often at home without a screen. So that's the first, I think, big benefit of voice. The second is most skills are developed through, early skills are developed through back and forth interaction and by modeling behavior, not pushing buttons or staring at screens. And so, we actually don't like to use the word AI or artificial intelligence. We use artificial unintelligence because we have the kid play the role of teacher, which has a lot of benefits in terms of agency and competence. And so kids basically teach the robot how to develop social skills and language and literacy and every learning domain. And then the last big benefit, which I think may be the most important, is how do we help adults be the best teachers that our kids need them to be? And so we are really trying to promote human-child interactions by modeling those behaviors, which is something that is kind of counterintuitive. You wouldn't think of that. But when you're in a classroom, and that's the core issue that I wanted to solve at the beginning, right? I couldn't be in the classroom. So how could we help this new teacher who is still learning? How can we help her how to model conversational turn-taking, perspective-seeking behavior, all this stuff that's really important, but is hard to scale. So that's the last big benefit.
Wonderful. So after those 2.5 amazing days here at ASU+GSV, I am left with a huge question, and I would like to ask each one of you to address it. I see this explosion of EdTech tools, and we have here with me five amazing solutions. But the big question is, what is this making a difference? Is it having an impact on learning? So the question is simply how do you measure impact? Is your solution having an impact? Or if you are not, what are your plans to look at evidence to make your product better over time? Delonn, do you want to start this time?
Sure. I mean, in terms of impact, some of the challenges that we could spend a lot of time talking about is how do you measure some of these early skills? But from our perspective on impact, we think about really three things. So we think about how do we help kids feel competent? How do we help kids have agency, and how do we foster those deeper human connections? Because if you do those things, the science would say you are literally fostering a love of learning. And once you have that, then you can start to help kids develop those executive function skills that we need for literacy. You can help kids develop social emotional skills that you need for other learning domains. And so we are much more focused on trying to align to the science, even if the technology or the science hasn't necessarily developed all the appropriate measures to evaluate impact. I was in a session yesterday with some of the leading experts on assessment, and it was obviously could be a very complex conversation. We didn't solve anything necessarily, but I don't want that to hold us back because life is too short.
Mark, you have
Sure.
you have thought about this for years, so you are.
Yeah, well, we're a little bit lucky because in our world, assessment exists big time, and there are well-accepted measures of progress. So in the reading world, the foundational measure is fluency, which we measure using voice. We listen to kids read, and we observe how many words they can read accurately in a minute. And that measure of fluency and a range of associated metrics that come out of assessments like NAEP and the state summatives give us an absolute way to say whether we're having an impact and whether we're doing good. So Amira is foundationally a measurement instrument, and we report every single week to the districts who use the software how much impact the solution is having on their kids. We measure the relationship between usage and that growth in fluency, and then we back that up with random control trials through independent researchers. I mentioned Columbia, but Amira's been the subject of RCTs from many universities, from Carnegie Mellon to the University of British Columbia to DePaul, and all of the research is aimed at giving the educators confidence that they understand not just that Amira will work, but how to implement with fidelity so that they can get the maximum value. And we compare that efficacy research really to what you see in the medical world, right? We talk about dosages and the need to really be precise about the interrelationship between the advanced technology and the teacher's instructions. So measurement is hopefully everything.
Wonderful. So, Tom, it may not be a fair question given that you have a 2-month-old company. However, maybe speak about your plans or how you're thinking about future measurement.
I think
any
it's
concerns
crucial
that you might have about having a product that may not be fully tested yet. Yeah.
I think it's important from day one to be thinking about these things, and for me, it's about honesty. And I think particularly going direct to parents, like schools theoretically should have the systems and procedures in place to properly evaluate things. I know that not all do, but they at least should. When you're going direct to parents, parents don't necessarily have that capacity and that training to do that. And so for us, I think it's being very honest about what we think we can do and what we are doing, and not trying to make claims that aren't true. So for us right now, we're really focused on motivation. We tell parents we want to help your child develop a love of reading. And so success for us is when we work ourselves out of business because they come back and say, my child now loves reading, we don't need you anymore. And that's like the best emails that we get. And so we are measuring that. Long term, we want to be able to claim about the incredible progress we'll do with fluency and things. And to do that, we need to put in place the sorts of tests that Amira have kind of led the way with. So yeah, it is a different challenge with a direct-to-consumer business, and it's really about honesty for me.
Thank you. Daniel, with another direct-to-consumer, how do you do it?
Yeah, correct. So, like I said, I more stumbled into this, but originally I figured I'm a highly critical of screen time. Like I said, I build games. I understand quick dopamine hit, rewarding, and I see it. I see the potential addiction, not just from kids, from all of us, basically, who are living on our phones, tablets all day long. and science-based, the blue light effects on children's eyes, the brain development. There's a lot of potentially negative impact. So I tried from early on to limit my kids' exposure completely. We call it detox at home, like Monday to Friday. There's simply no screen time allowed in the house. And so we are approaching it, hey, if I have somebody listening 30 minutes to a story or a self-recorded story from the parents, I would like to echo what I heard in the sense of like, how do I get my kids engaged? And I've seen it if it's familiarity, if it's family that records, that gives them something to think about. That's what they want to listen all over and all over again. So every minute I have a family listening into one of our audio stories, I feel like, hey, maybe I've saved them a few minutes from screen time. That was originally how we started. And then I thought, maybe we need to go a little bit deeper, and our whole system is cloud connected. So we are trying to understand, we have the early first data points, how kids respond to interactive questions in the content. It's not always about right or wrong, it's just about reacting at all to what they're hearing. In our books, it's about understanding the storyline and then asking which characters were involved and what were you feeling when you heard about them. So we're having early signs of collecting this data, but we're nowhere near to really already can show any efficacy in any way. Hopefully, long run.
Martyn, you've been at it for a while, and I know you're thinking deeply about this.
You make me sound very old now, Isabelle. Yeah, we have been doing this for a while. I think you touched on a kind of really important, more general point around evidence-based approaches to efficacy in technology and education. And I think there's my own personal opinion is there's not enough of that around. And I think that most of us, I think all of us here on this panel, certainly have a motivation to improve outcomes for children. That's where we're coming from. This is not about technology for technology's sake. And we all have a responsibility, therefore, to actually make it our business to go out and find third-party validation and evidence to support the work that we're doing. We do that very proactively. We do it at a very core level in terms of just the underlying accuracy of the system itself, but then we go out and work with people like Yakov Pecher at the Florida Center for Reading Research, who looks at, for example, generating evidence to support not just the accuracy of the system, but its ability to deal with children without inherent bias, for example. The gold standard for any speech technology, particularly in education and dealing with kids, is it at least as accurate as a human assessor would be? Right? So whatever the use case, whatever the context, whether it's reading fluency, as Mark has described, and we do a lot of work in reading fluency as well, is that system going to be at least as accurate as a human assessor? And human assessors are not flawless either, right? And there's lots of inter-rater variability that happens. But you need to, in order to build trust, in order to make sure that you are going to have that impact in the market, you need to make sure that you can demonstrate that you are going to be at least as accurate as a human assessor can be. And I think that's a really key point that we all have to take ownership of as we bring these products into market.
Actually, I wanted to follow up on your, you mentioned the word bias, and I wanted to follow up on that with maybe a little bit more provocative question. So we have 5 men on this panel. Good news is that this is a very global, global group, very international group, but very white. And so clearly for me, this calls for bias, this calls for a lot of, these ideas, okay, well, who is building the AI, who is behind those voice recognition technologies, and are there any risks of biases that are embedded into who is building the tech? So I would love to understand more. Is it the composition of this panel, or how are you addressing those concerns more proactively? And I will start with you, Tom.
Excuse me. Yeah, it's something that we need to think deeply about. For us, I mean, when it comes to AI, it often comes to the data that's going into it, forms the biases, and the data that goes into it can often be biased based on who the people are who are running the company. So I'm not going to claim in a million years that we're perfect, but we try and ensure that the team as a whole, I think as of next Monday, we're a majority female company. We're trying to ensure that we're a diverse company so that when we're building these things, we keep that in mind. The other thing I'd say is, though, some of the advances in machine learning that are happening, hopefully themselves will make that problem easier, because the data input will change, basically. The requirements around the data input will change, which will make it easier to create data sets. So if I just go and I walk out of my house and get data from the 10 people around me, I'm going to get a very biased data set. Kind of new advances will allow that to become much easier to be more representative. So that's a hopeful thing on the horizon.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we need to be hyper concerned about bias, and there is rarely a conversation we have with educators when this issue isn't literally the first question they ask. They ask either, can Amira really understand the range of accents and dialects in our incredibly cosmopolitan and diverse student base, or they ask explicitly about the possibility that Amira will not be culturally sensitive and appropriately equitable for all the kids in the district. And I think at the end of the day, what we need to really focus on is the science and the math. No matter how hard we strive to eliminate bias, the only real way to solve the problem is to be relentless around letting the data speak for itself. And so there are many well-known techniques that have arisen out of the assessment psychometric world called diff analysis that allow us to look at the experiences we're delivering to children and to students and to identify variation across subpopulation. As was just being said, there are many increasingly fantastic mechanisms within the machine learning world to have metacognizance of whether the training that's happening with the models are producing biased outcomes. So for us, this is really about transparency in using all of those techniques to not just say we're trying to do the right thing, but to show as statistically, as mathematically, as quantitatively, as empirically as we possibly can, that we have driven bias as much as possible out of the solution.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for raising that. I think it's, number one, I think it's just important to acknowledge, and I'll just speak for myself, but I think we all have biases, and I think it's really critical that we're aware of them. We have, I'll give you a couple examples, but the original version of this were very rooted in science, it's color theory, but it had blue eyes. Because that's what the color theory would say. But when we made it, we thought, you know what, that's not as equitable as we can be. And so we changed it, and it cost us weeks and lots of dollars, but it was the right thing to do. But I think about bias even more broadly. I think there's a lot of bias. I think there's a bias to focus on higher ed rather than early ed, because that's where money is. There's a bias to focus on sometimes maybe assessments versus helping kids learn because it's easier to measure. There's a bias to focus on math and literacy, again, because they're easier to measure. There's a bias to focus on devices that have screens because it's just easier and practical. And so I think we all need to be thinking about biases through our own, through the lens of who we serve. And I guess the last thing I'll say is when we make experiences, we made this game to help kids build empathy, where the kids teach the robot how to develop, what it's like to be different. And through all of the vignettes in that, we worked with kids and families that had differences. And there's no way that we would have been able to make that game without their feedback. And I think we will continue to strive to be better, and we will never be perfect, but that's what keeps us excited to do the work we do.
Daniel?
Yeah, so very, very tough question. Addressing it the right, I don't know if there's a right way. We are a founder team, male, all three male, Latin American, German, white Caucasian, Asian American, but still we lacked input from clearly women, and we realized early on, before we even built the product, we started reaching out, building little focus groups, reaching out to Facebook groups of moms, trying to get their input. I quickly learned that I don't at all understand enough about what especially moms. I mean, I'm married to a mom, but all the things that are on her plate, all the things that she has to go through every day, and keep the balls in the air, while I'm just focused on building a company, and realized that we have a clear shortcoming in the company, and the first hires were all women. And that also sounds somehow weird and maybe wrong, but right now our content is our way how to create inclusion and to bring in women thinking, women's voice. And our content team is completely female, and I know they can do things I could never do in a million years. So that's in the small microcosmos of my company where we're trying to work on that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm seeing some signs that we may need to wrap up. So, Martyn's last words from you.
Okay, very quickly, and I'll be short if I don't mention this. On the gender balance issue, we have a female founder. Leadership team is 50% female. Our entire business is 50% female. But we have to be proactively going out to ensure that we do that, right? Because it is an issue in the market, and particularly if you're looking for machine learning engineers, if you're looking for computational linguists, the supply side is not there. So we're working actually with universities in Ireland to design courses that are going to attract a better gender balance into that supply side as well. So you have to work, as a business, you have to work at all levels. You can't just throw your hands up and say, well, there's not enough females out there in the market, so we can't employ them. You have to actually work to achieve those outcomes, and that's really important.
Do you track also race and ethnicity?
Say that again?
Race and ethnicity as well as
So
gender?
we have 14 nationalities in our business. We have 35 people, 14 nationalities. So yes, on our side, we absolutely do, 100%.
Well, thank you, everyone, for a great discussion. Thank you for attending the session. And I think we'll be outside if there are any follow-up questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.